Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Joined on this episode by someone else with a wonderful set of headphones, very impressive headphones, and that is comics creator Scott Harris King. Scott, thank you for joining.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on and being willing to talk with me for a few minutes. And I know that folks out there will know you for a series called Quest. So anything that you'd like to say about Quest to sort of be a background for maybe listeners that are new to it?
Sure. Yeah. Quest is an epic fantasy series, and it's basically sort of my ode to Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings and Bronze Age comics like Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, and Warlord in particular is a huge favorite of mine. So basically, it's a series about a group of adventurers who are thrown together by fate, and they're charged with a quest where they have to deliver this magical artifact 1,000 miles through monsters and dungeons and haunted forests and ruined castles and all the good stuff. They don't know why they're going. They don't know what waits for them at the end. They just know that if they don't do it, it's gonna be the end of the world. Um, I love playing D&D. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was a little kid back in 1980, and so this is Quest is sort of just me, having fun with all of the epic fantasy stuff that I love all in one place.
Cool. Yeah. What initially got you into kind of the D&D zone comics? Did you have people in your family that were playing? Did you have friends that were playing and things like
Yeah, it
that?
was neighborhood kids. Back when that was a thing. When I was growing up.
Neighborhoods and kids, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, after school, I would go over and to my grandparents' house because my parents were working, and they would watch me for, couple hours after school. And then during the summer, I would spend all every day at my grandparents' house. There's a little neighborhood there with, the kids that lived on around the block and on the street.
Mhm.
And right around the corner, there was a couple kids there that had all of these D&D books. So they had like the red box, they had the blue box with the basic rules. And then they also had all of the like hardcover advanced stuff, the Monsters Manual, the Fiend Folio,
Mhm.
a Dungeon Master's Guide, like all that stuff. And so it was just something where like the first time I played it, I didn't know what it was, obviously. And so we made the characters, we played the game one day, and I just immediately was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard of. I just loved it. And then every day I would be like, let's play Dungeons and Dragons. And they'd be like, let's play baseball. I'm like, no, what do you, I wouldn't want to do that. So yeah, I became really annoying because I wanted to play every day. So yeah, it's just the neighborhood kids happened to have all the rule books and stuff, and I would play with them. I didn't know anyone else that played it. So it was just when we could, and eventually, like I didn't know anyone else that played it, so I started buying the modules and stuff myself.
Mhm.
And then I would just run through them myself. So I would make a bunch of characters, and then I would just DM myself playing through the adventure because I didn't have anyone else to play with. So
Oh, yeah.
um, yeah, so yeah, that's how I started down that road.
Nice, nice. Yeah, love the connection with fantasy storytelling, and I love the idea of like playing board games. I was an action figure kid too, so telling stories through those means, and then later on telling stories through comics, books, like novels or whatever it happens to be. I love those connections.
Yeah, it's you know, I was really into a lot of cartoons at the time. Like we were really lucky in my area. We were one of the regions where we got a big block of anime
Mhm.
every day from 3 to 4 here. I live outside of Boston. Would be an anime block. So it was Star Blazers was at 3:30, and then at 3 before that was a show called Force 5, and every day of the week was a different uh anime series. So every Monday was Dan Ace and so on. And so it really got into the sci-fi and fantasy elements and stuff really early on, very young.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. You know, curious about, I tend to ask people what things like science fiction and fantasy allow them to do because they're removed from our world and yet they're not. So curious about some of the threads that you like to pull on, the themes you like to include.
That's a great question. I mean, and it, uh, I have three different ongoing series, and not to get into the other stuff, get ahead of myself here, but it depends on which one I'm writing,
Hmm.
because they sort of serve different functions for me, and they have different, so they go down different paths. Um, in Quest, for me as like a D&D, when I was growing up as a kid, I was grew up in like a really religious community. So
Hmm.
I was going to church school, private church school, church every week, and wasn't allowed to watch TV or do anything from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge escape from all of that. It was like a fantastic world where I could be anybody I wanted to be. I could explore worlds, see amazing things and stuff. And when I do quests, it's really the story I'm telling just boils down to that.
Yeah.
So, I try with all of my books. I'm a big believer in subtext over text, like in
Hmm.
terms of um, what the stories are about. I also have a very strong belief that stories have to be about something, or it's not really a story. It's just a sequence of events. So, like when I'm writing my stories, I always have in mind like what is this about, separate from what the plot is. You
Hmm.
know, the plot. They're fighting a dragon, um, whatever they're doing in those stories, the plot and the actions they're having are in service to whatever the story is actually about. And in Quest, I want to do action, so there's a lot of like um, fight scenes, and every issue they're going in a different dungeon, or they're fighting a different monster, whatever it is, haunted
Hmm.
stuff like that. So the sort of meaning of things is very much in the subtext and sort of subplots, and it's further back there than my other stories because
Yeah.
I'm so action forward. But this what the series is ultimately about, and as it goes along, it'll slowly really sort of come more to the forefront, is about dogma. All the different characters have certain belief systems that they're rooted in when the story starts. And as they're on their journey, like with any good sort of travel, you encounter things that challenge your beliefs as you meet new people with different ideas and experience different things. And so that's what Quest is ultimately about. It's about people in these dogmatic systems having those systems challenged and how they change or don't change in response to this sort of new information. And so, in a way, it really goes back to where I started from as a kid in a religious community,
Hmm.
wanting to sort of escape from it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, again, on the surface, it's very much all the really fun stuff that I love about the fantasy genre. But the subtext is sort of that personal, like, um, questioning. I love to travel. You can see the travel posters that I have.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
wife and I have all over the house because we love to travel. And that's the joy of traveling, is just on these adventures, seeing things you've never seen before and meeting people that you've never met before and will never meet again. And that's what fantasy does. But you also have in your imagination, you can create, places that have never existed before and people that could never exist before you thought of them. So that's really what the fantasy does for me in terms of a story function. It allows me to do all that.
Cool, very cool. I love the world building aspects, definitely. And uh, curious about any particular steps you go through as you're crafting a world. Are there steps that you found helpful as a writer?
Well, I love doing maps.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean that's super helpful for me. Um, I kind of come up with the characters first. Um, I have the sort of with Quest, I have the general plot. I know where they're going. I know where they're going to end up. Not 100% sure what they're going to find on their way there,
Hmm.
because that's sort of going to come about as I'm exploring the characters.
Right,
And
right.
so, I have sort of my main characters. Um, and there's a lot of turnover in Quest because it's a very brutal world. We start with a group of characters. In issue one, our adventuring party's got 11 people in it at the beginning of issue one. By the end of issue one, there's five. And not all of those people make it to issue three.
Uh,
But then we have new people that they're meeting along the way and have their own stories and join them along the way and stuff like that. So when I'm creating these new characters to bring them in, what I'm thinking of is rooting it in the main characters whose stories I want to tell. And so, like, for instance, in issue four, we meet a whole new group of people. They've got their own things going on that we'll learn about eventually. But I specifically crafted those new characters who are going to be on the journey for a while to be mirrors of the main characters so that their belief systems can be a direct challenge to the existing characters.
yeah,
So I've got like these three characters. By the time it gets to issue four, there's basically three main characters. And we get a whole giant group of new people that are introduced in issue four, but three of them I specifically crafted to be like the counterpoint to this character. This character's got a counterpoint. So now they can sort of talk to each other and stuff like that. So knowing my characters and who they are and the story I want with them allows me to then craft everything else. I'm at the point now where I'm sort of plotting out the specifics of like issues seven and eight. And I'm really thinking like what I have ideas for monsters again, dungeons, different things that I think would be fun. Like I want to do an issue that's basically them going through the video game gauntlet with the characters. But I'm thinking like what events in the plot do I want that can bring out specific things with the characters that I want to address. Like if I don't want the stuff to be random events. They need to have a purpose for the character development.
mm,
Even if it's something very small, but every issue I want to have something in there that causes our characters to change a little bit or something that happens that reveals a little bit more about our characters that we didn't know before. And so I need to find specific scenarios or plot elements or twists or whatever that draws those things out of the characters. So that's kind of where how I do it with quests in particular is I've got the characters. What can I set up for them to encounter that will allow me to dig into the characters and tell their stories better?
sense. Sense. Any words about the collaborative process, folks that have been particularly helpful along the way?
Well, with Quest, it's been a bit of a challenge. Just the nature of being like an indie self-published person. When I first started working on my first comic, The Crimebusters, I drew I did everything myself, all the art completely myself, including doing it in black and white because I'm colorblind. So I was like, I didn't at that point, I didn't have the money to hire a colorist, so I didn't do it in color. I did in black and white. And eventually I was like, I want to tell all these other stories like Quest, and I just draw too slowly to do two titles. So
Mhm.
then I started hiring artists to do the titles, and I sort of became mostly the writer and doing less art. And one thing that's just part of that is because I'm basically, I'm hiring artists that are kind of on work for hire. It's not
Mhm.
like a true collaboration. Um, and With Quest, for instance, I got a guide issue one. It was great, loved it. Was not available when I went to do issue two. He had
Yeah.
to signed on for another gig. So I got a guy that did issues two and three, looked great, had a very similar style to the first person. So I don't think anyone probably even noticed that much that it was a different artist. The creative process interacting with each of them was a little bit different. Everyone has their own sort of, all the artists have their own style, including their own communication style, which can sometimes be a challenge. After issue three, he wasn't available for issue four. So then I had to bring in a third artist to do issue four. So it's not even the actual collaboration in terms of creative challenge. It's the administrative part is the real challenge
Hmm.
that I've found because it significantly affects then the creative product. The person that I brought in for issue four is great, but her style was very different from the people that did the first three issues.
Yeah.
And so then it was sort of like, I'm writing a different kind of story because I have a different kind of artist. And, sort of, and her style still worked for the book because it was more of like an animation style. So I was basically like, well, it's kind of like the old, Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s. It still
Hmm.
has the D&D feel, but in a different way than the other ones, which are more of a, Conan sort of more realistic actiony style. But yeah, it's just every artist I work with is figuring out like how they work
Hmm.
is a big part of it, and it's really hard to find someone. I've been really lucky that most of the artists I've worked with have been quite reliable, but it's even with that, it's really hard when you're doing like one issue or two issues a year.
Sure. Sure.
They need other work to pay the bills. And so when you come back to them, most of the time they're not available anymore. So it's kind of so with Quest, for instance, the guy who did issue one was finally available again. So he's doing issue five.
Uh-huh.
But starting with issue six, I'm just going to be drawing it myself. Um, because I'm sort of like, I want it to be stable and I want to know, like, I just want to, settle it down. So I'm just going to handle that myself and get back to drawing like I did at the beginning.
Yeah. Uh, well, wishing you well as you negotiate all that. I know that calls upon you to be quite flexible in the process. If folks out there want to go and find out about the book, if they want to support, where are some places that they would want to visit?
The best place to go is crimebustercomics.com. That's my main website where I have all my comics. Um, I also have a website called questcomicbook.com. And if you go to that website, it redirects to whatever my current um, quest campaign is. So if you
Cool.
go there now, it'll bring you to issue four, which is finished, but you can see the campaign for issue four. And sometime within the next couple weeks, I'm going to have the pre-launch page for issue five up. So if you go to questcomicbook.com in 2 weeks from now, it'll be redirecting you to the pre-launch for issue five. So that's something where if you're looking for Quest in particular, that's an address that just goes to whatever the most recent Quest Kickstarter campaign is. Whereas crimebustercomics.com is all of my different titles sort of all in one place.
Cool. Cool. So, well, Scott, I greatly appreciate the time. I appreciate the opportunity to share about your work, and I'm always a fan of comics creators. Is there anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
I guess I just mentioned that I have a campaign for one of my other titles is live until February 21st. That's Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, number one and two, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's set in World War II, and when the Axis powers try to summon Cthulhu to win World War II, Uncle Sam has to stop them. So that'll be running until February 21st. And then later this year, we'll have Quest number five. My
Mhm.
series of Crimebusters issue seven will be out this year, and then hopefully by the end of the year we'll have Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam number three as well. So I should have new issues of all three of my titles out this year, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Many thanks again, and glad to have you back anytime. It's an open invitation.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Same here.